Good day, and welcome to this edition of Big Ideas in Supply Chain. My name is Ann Robinson. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Kinaxis. My guest in studio today is Andre Teixeira, the VP of Global Supply Chain for Jamieson Wellness. Andre and I share a passion around supply chain sustainability, and he's going to share some thoughts on how to operationalize sustainability. Andre, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your passion for sustainability? What and how did it get started?
Well, it started when I graduated. I got in a trainee program in a company called Natura Cosmetics. They're the largest cosmetics in Latin America, one of the top 5 in the world. And they have that passion for sustainability. So since in the 2000s, when we haven't heard about ESG yet, they were already all over that. So it's lots of purpose over there. And I got in supply chain there and started working on sourcing with local communities in Amazon, the rainforest, and seeing the reality of decisions that you can make based on the triple bottom line, like on the social, on the environmental, and economic aspects that we're making there, and we're seeing the results. That drove me with a great passion around this topic.
And now you're at Jamieson Wellness. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Jamieson Wellness. I'm sure not to confuse it with the other Jamiesons that some people may be familiar with.
Yeah, Jamieson is a health and wellness company. We have the vision of making the world, bring the health and wellness to the world. We are a Canadian leader in the vitamins, minerals, and supplements market. So we are well known here in Canada, and we also have global operations. We are present in more than 45 countries.
Okay.
With more than 10 distribution centers, 4 manufacturing facilities in Canada and United States, and with a great commitment in the ESG topics. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you've been quoted as saying that supply chains are ESG in action. Can you tell us a bit more about that, and why is it that you believe that?
Well, everything that moves across this globe is supply chain driven. So if you think about people, goods, and everything that is moving has some resource that came out from the earth. We took energy, we took water, and many environmental and social concepts on that. So when you think supply chain, we're making decisions every day. And when we take those impacts into consideration, we are making better decisions by the simple fact that you're looking at the environment, at the social aspect, with economics. Economics is always important, but if you take these 3 in consideration, you're going to make better decisions. As we make better decisions, we make a better planet.
I think Kinaxis CEO John Sicard has said, just by its very nature, supply chains are consumers of the Earth's natural resources. So anything we can do to improve the supply chain is ultimately in service of humanity and in service of Mother Earth. So, yeah, it makes complete sense. Jamieson now has made some significant corporate commitments to sustainability. Can you tell us a little bit more about those, and what's your team's role in operationalizing them?
So Jamieson is a 100-years-old company. We're just turning 100 years into
congratulations.
This year. Thank you. And we have commitments for another 100 years. And our strategy is very bold, our commitments with the planet, with our people, and our communities. When we put these as targets, we're talking about reducing our plastic, using recyclable plastic in 50% of our packaging. We're talking about reducing 75% of our landfill and bringing more sustainable raw materials to our products. So by 2030, which is our commitment around these goals, we have several activities and several initiatives on that. Supply chain, of course, is the engine that has been working with manufacturing, with our ESG teams, operationalizing this. So since sourcing, helping with different suppliers, what kind of models and transportation that we can use to bring our products in. So different aspects and different initiatives to ensure that we are hitting these targets.
Was your executive team aware of supply chain's role when it comes to achieving their sustainability targets? I know a lot of companies struggle at connecting sort of this big vision around sustainability and then how they're actually going to operationalize it. Was there always that understanding, or is that something that you helped bring to the table?
What makes the difference in Jamieson, I believe that is that buying since the top and the alignment of that vision. So this vision of making the planet, bring the health and wellness to the world, includes the health and wellness of the planet.
Yeah.
And that comes from the top management. We, of course, collaborate in order to bring those perspectives from supply chain and how we can help the management and the overall company to make better decisions around this overall sustainability topics.
It sounds like it's very much part of your corporate culture.
That's in the DNA for sure.
Oh, yeah. That's great. You've said that supply chains have the power to impact the environment positively because we have the levers to make a difference. Could you tell us more about your thinking kind of in that area and maybe some of the levers that you're referring to?
Well, supply chain, when we make the decisions in supply chain, we are looking at, for example, what kind of transportation we're going to use, right? Today is like where we're going to source products is critical. Am I going to air freight or am I going to bring it by ocean? So sometimes we are looking only on the cost, and if we bring the data and look at the carbon emissions and how much carbon you're going to bring in if you make such decision, you're also making a better decision.
Right.
So I believe that in supply chain we work with so much data, so many KPIs. We're benchmark on that. We can help the sustainability overall if we bring those KPIs with those lens. And that's what we've been doing in Jamieson. We're building up those numbers, those KPIs, in order to help us to make better decisions holistically.
Right, that makes a ton of sense. You've said that you see the next stage of IBP, so integrated business planning, as bringing in ESG into the decision-making framework. Where do you start, maybe for some of the people who are listening? What are some of the first steps they can do to really augment that S&OP IBP process?
Yeah, I believe that data is our first step. So getting the data, collecting the data. So think about a bill of materials. So I can talk about a more technical terminology here because we are among supply chain professionals,
supply chain people
right?
here, that's right.
So when you have a bill of materials with products and descriptions and quantities, how about having the environmental impact of those items in your bill of material? How you're projecting while we are projecting our inventory levels today, we look at units, we look at dollars. How about projecting your carbon emissions with your level of sales, with your forecasting, and you're gonna get that level that I have clarity on where I am and what kind of scenarios we can use to mitigate those carbon emissions that I foresee. In the integrated business planning, we're making those decisions. We are running scenarios. So that's where it comes to play. Am I air freighting and I'm bringing by ocean? What are the trade-offs that we have? Am I sourcing from overseas? Am I sourcing for someplace locally? Am I using plastic? Am I using paper? So there are all these trade-offs that you bring to the table when you are running the integrated business planning across your organization.
So the idea of having greater transparency, not just from a cost perspective, not just from a materials perspective, but really adding the data that allows you to understand from different environmental factors like water consumption or carbon emissions to include that in your scenario analysis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You really are in an enviable spot with the corporate culture that gets it, with the executive leadership team that gets it. For somebody who might have, I often in my conversations where, again, big company vision, but the supply chain organization isn't involved in that decision process around sustainability. How should somebody kind of approach their leadership to say, your source of operationalizing is right here in your supply chain? What are some tips maybe, or what guidance would you give to an organization that says, we want to improve, we want to help the planet, but we haven't gotten that level of buy-in yet?
In my opinion, supply chain has that power of showing the data.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what we are using, what we are consuming, and we can start influencing, but by giving visibility of what's the impact of these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to push to make a decision if you have the data to show what's the impact that those decisions are generating. So once you have that in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
it makes the discussion much healthier,
Right.
and productive to go towards a specific goal. It's like when you don't know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty hard to make decisions. But when you see what you're generating, then you start having good conversations. The dialogue is the main piece of where supply chain can help other organizations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just getting the dialogue going and showing the data to support it. Makes sense. Well, I have one last question for you. It's a little different than the others that we've spoken about so far, but we like to ask every one of our guests. If you were the chief supply chain officer of the world, what would be your first priority for transforming the world's supply chains?
Wow. I'd say that transparency, when you talk about sustainability, is key. I would say that having full transparency and giving the consumer the option to make good decisions when they're buying their product would be key, and supply chain can be a big enabler of those decisions. So I can decide where I want to go, if I want to go with A or B, and more impact, less impact. But you leave it up to the consumer with the right information to make that decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really interesting conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
If you'd like to learn more about Andre and his team at Jamieson Wellness, please find a link to a recent presentation in the podcast bio. And join us next time as we explore more big ideas in supply chain.